Good day, everyone. I am Jed, one of your hosts for today's webinar. Before establishing some house rules for this webinar, let me introduce my partner.
Hello everyone, I am Skyler, your other and beautiful host here. And with Jed, we will be your hosts for today's webinar. And yes, we do have some house rules where
Listen to the speeches as they are the centerpiece of this webinar.
if it is possible, open your cameras.
Keep your microphones on mute.
Most importantly, follow the netiquette and school rules apply in this webinar.
Do you have an idea of what our webinar is? Let's guess for a bit. Maybe about pollution?
Let me also guess. Should it be about water? Or about nature?
I'm sure there's a lot to learn in this webinar. But before we come to the main event, let us first have Mr. Michael Xiao for the opening prayer.
Let us put in mind the presence of the Lord, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, teach me to be generous, teach me to serve as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to ask for reward. Save that of knowing that I will do your will. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Xiao. A healthy environment is sustainable for an extended period since it is the source of life for everyone. The good or bad quality of our life depends on the quality of our natural environment. Our need for food, water, shelter, and other things depends on the environment. And there must be a balanced natural cycle between the environment and the lives of human beings, plants, and animals. We, humans, play a vital role in generating the natural environment. Our actions in this modern world directly impacts our ecosystem, resulting in many environmental problems.
I agree with what you have said, Skyler. We all need to raise awareness on the exploitation of the environment and how we should prevent it. This is why we arranged this webinar, to present a relevant and informative topic. And that topic that we will tackle today is about the environment as a whole. 6 speakers will join us here today, and let's welcome the first speaker, Mr. Zyke Gabriel C. San Antonio, with the speech, Water Remedies.
Mistreated even at present, it all comes to finding a proper solution to the problem. Water should be pollution free in all ways possible. It has to be addressed. Clean and safe water is achieved by reducing water pollution. According to a press release by UNICEF, around 9% of Filipinos do not have access to basic water services. This is an issue as people get water access with untreated water sources. Other places do even have water pollution, which increases the risk of sickness and the need to act upon the issue. Most importantly, water sources are not easily replenished. We must conserve water to minimize the significant problems of unsafe water, where both nature and humans use every day. The main reason is to reduce polluting water is that water resources are limited. Only around 3% of all water on Earth that we use is fresh water, and most of that amount is contained in glaciers. The remaining amounts are the only sources that we could tap so far. With limited amount of water supplies at present, we must note that cutting down water pollution will make us utilize a percentage of fresh water to be used more appropriately. Another way to solve the unsafe water problem is to enact further established laws. Many places have access to water, but more areas need clean water. Further enacting established laws would give an excellent opportunity to reach out to the people who needed clean water badly. People who use unsafe water every day will finally have the opportunity to have safe sources of water in the long run. Lastly, there are also living things that need the water that we use, In the Philippines, there are many unique species and lots of animals that use water. If water is mismanaged, there's a very likely chance that we are disturbing the energy levels of the ecosystem, which indeed may hurt these creatures. By cutting down our water pollution, we take care of water such that we won't be able to harm the ecosystem around our country. However, there are other ways to reduce water pollution, and that is due to technological advancements. There are other ways such as establishing sewage treatment plants or even river cleaning technologies. Investing in technologies that will clean water is a solution to this problem. With that in mind, it will be able to reduce water pollution in general. Indeed, there are other ways to sanitize water and people should start adapting. Either way, doing our part in ensuring responsible water usage will ultimately help us both ecologically and in our day-to-day lives. But we must note that whatever we are doing and bringing positive change is already a way to help solve the problem in the long run. I call people to take action simply by just turning off a tap, carefully measuring water, or even participating in community-based cleanup drives. That's all.
Thank you very much for that inspiring speech. Indeed, we have to take action, especially water pollution that just happens in many, many places around the world.
Let me introduce to you the second speaker for this webinar, Ms. Mhonique Grace S. Victoria, with her speech entitled Stopping Water Scarcity Can Make a Greater Difference.
Is raising awareness about water scarcity enough for the people who experiences it? There are many ways to prevent or stop water scarcity. Water scarcity refers to a lack of access to the water resources required to keep a region buoyant, and prevention is an action to help solve scarcity. Water scarcity prevention helps educate people to be more responsible in conserving water resources. Although prevention is useless when water is unlimited, we should handle water use responsibly to change water use efficiency over time, ensure water withdrawal, and maintain proper filtration. The first argument is handling water use responsibly to change water use efficiency over time. Saving or minimizing water use, like using a cup in rinsing, checking for leaks, and recycling water, is a way of handling water use responsibly. Reduced water consumption minimizes the amount of energy necessary to treat and carry it to homes, businesses, farms, and communities, resulting in less pollution and resource conservation. The second argument is to ensure water withdrawal. Abusing water resources could lead to a lesser chance of maintaining equilibrium. Proper water withdrawal can significantly help the fast and equal distribution of water. The last argument is maintaining proper water filtration. Through this, we can use water for daily use, such as drinking. According to studies, filtration helps recycle water into drinking water, which can help people who experience water scarcity, especially those who live in Africa. However, according to studies, water is unlimited. We can get water anywhere since the world is covered with 71% of water. Despite having a large body of water, only about 0.4% of 71% can be used by humans. Approximately 40% of water is contaminated and not potable. With these arguments, prevention or taking action for water scarcity is better than merely stating awareness. To sum up, people should practice responsible water usage to track its regulations, reduce the abuse of water, and purify the water worldwide. We could provide the upcoming generation with cleaner and adequate moisture to use for their daily lives by performing such aforementioned. I advocate for the movement of responsible water, provided that you are now guided with awareness. Stopping water scarcity can make a greater difference.
Very well said, Miss Victoria. We need to understand that every person deserves to meet their basic needs, especially water.
Before we proceed to the next speaker, let's first have a short commercial break by watching this short video about water pollution. Thank you everyone for patiently waiting. I hope you learned something from the video we have shown you.
At this juncture, may we now call on the third speaker for this webinar, Mr. Michael Xiao, with his speech entitled, "There is no life without water."
Is there any way we can live without water? Water is the most essential mineral and mostly composed on our planet. This requires most of us to survive day to day in life. Water, as defined by Britannica, is a substance composed of the chemical elements hydrogen and oxygen and existing in gaseous, liquid, and solid states. It is one of the most plentiful and essential of compounds, a tasteless and odorless liquid at room temperature. It has the important ability to dissolve many other substances. Indeed, the versatility of water as a solvent is essential to living organisms. It is mostly where animals live in which oceans help them live freely. With such, water cannot be disregarded and be removed in our life. The first reason why we cannot live without water is because water is needed by plants to produce oxygen. The oxygen is the chemical that the plants produce through photosynthesis. Oxygen is the air that we breathe in order to survive. Without water, plants can produce oxygen in which we humans cannot live without breathing it. The second reason why we cannot live without water is because most of the earth resources are water. Oceans cover almost 70% of the earth. So if water evaporates or dissipates from earth, what would the planet become? Also, water in our ocean kept the mass of our planet be balanced. It kept the earth be in its place in the solar system. The third and last reason is that water supports all forms of life from the smallest living organism up until largest. Water is the necessity of each living organism in which help the biodiversity and balance in the environment. Maybe some of us would say that we need to do something in which to improve our human lives. One of it was the start of industrial revolution that started in 1750s. Due to this revolution, our lives become more efficient and effective due to the appliances and tools that were invented. Yes, these tools help improve our lives, making our work easier, but problems, especially the environmental ones, come with this. Too much carbon dioxide produced by these industries, tools, cars, and appliances result to ocean acidification, in which, according to Britannica, is the worldwide reduction in the potential hydrogen of seawater as a consequence of the absorption of large amount of carbon dioxide by the oceans. The Earth atmosphere were loaded with large quantities of carbon dioxide produced by vehicles and industrial and agricultural processes, in which resulted in the declination of seawater. To concur in these industries means that we are endangering our lives also, as we cannot live with just these tools, appliances, and invention without water. In summary, there would be no life without water. There would be no humans without water. There would be no plants nor animals without water. Yes, we can live easier because of these technologies, machineries, and appliances that we produce, but we need to consider the amount of damage that it can cause to our oceans and environment. We can have our life easy with this technology, but let us make sure that the pollution and carbon dioxide that we are producing would be limited.
Thank you for raising the point, Mr. Xiao. We must appreciate how important water is for everyone.
Let us now hear from our fourth speaker, from my partner, Miss Skyler Perfect Mariae P. Yamson, with her speech, Save the Nature to Save the Future.
What comes to mind when you hear the words climate change? Climate change affects us all in different ways. It is caused by human activities and is threatening our way of living and the future of our planet. This is a long-term global or regional change in weather patterns. These changes may be natural, though it is greatly affected by the greenhouse gas emissions, such as methane and carbon dioxide. If we address these issues rather than neglecting them, we can save and build a sustainable planet for everyone in our future. But we need to act now. The ability to adapt, mitigate, and reduce carbon emissions will be essential for future generations to protect the world. Adaptation. This is one of the ways to combat climate change and improve climate resilience. Understanding local hazards and taking measures to minimize them is the first step in adapting to climate change. The next step is to take action to put systems in place to respond to current impacts while we prepare for an unpredictable situation. Countries and communities must develop adaptation strategies to put them into action to respond to current climate change damages and plan for future impacts. Furthermore, another way to combat climate change is mitigation, avoiding and reducing the release of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere to prevent warming our planet. The goal of mitigation is for humans to reach net zero carbon emissions. The sooner we act to mitigate the impacts of climate change, the safer we'll be in the future. Lastly, reducing our carbon emissions is also essential. We must use clean and renewable energy instead of powering our world with fossil fuels, restoring our natural habitats and sustainability. The earlier we reduce emissions, the easier it will be to adapt to changes. However, implementing actions to combat climate change takes a lot of organizations and financial support. Many nations are currently building resilient communities and economies, but more action will be needed to cost-effectively handle today's future risks. The more rapidly the climate changes and the longer it takes to adapt, the more expensive and challenging it will be. Governments and businesses must make significant financial investments in climate action. We can save lives, money, and avoid setbacks in the progress we've made by acting immediately. To conclude everything, there are several ways to combat climate change for us to build a healthier and safer future. There are many things that each of us can do as individuals. It is never too late to take urgent action and take the initiative to lessen the effects of climate change. But always remember that even the smallest act can make a huge difference in this world.
Thank you for that very substantial and inspiring speech, Skyler. I'm sure everyone will take note of what you have said.
I hope so, Jed. So before we jump right into the next speaker, let us first watch this video about global warming. Alright, thank you everyone for watching. We are down to the last two speakers for today's webinar.
Yes, so let us welcome Miss Xena Elisa C. Valdemoro, the fifth speaker with her speech entitled Water Crisis is a Woman's Crisis.
Access to clean water and sanitation is essential to the sustainable development, the economic, and the social progress of women and girls worldwide. as illustrated by the United Nations through Sustainable Development Goal number 6, or the Clean Water and Sanitation. The SDG number 6 calls for universal access to sanitation and water, since more than 2 billion people suffer from a lack of access to safely managed sanitation and water. With the enormous number of people suffering due to this universal problem, women and girls are still suffering the most. Sanitation refers to the general health conditions related to clean drinking water and treatment, and disposal of human excreta and sewage. Water collection has always been a primary responsibility of women, so it affects them significantly since the lack of access to clean water is personal to them. The water crisis has many adverse effects on low-income women, whether personal, health-related, or survival. The first reason why the water crisis is a women's problem is personal reasons. In many regions like India, women are responsible for fetching water. Hence, the time spent on this chore often means girls miss schools, and women miss out on the chance to earn a decent living. Everyone needs to understand that this is how poverty starts. Without a primary education or the ability to get a formal wage-earning job, many women become locked into a vicious cycle of poverty. The second reason why the water crisis is a women's problem is health-related issues. When women have limited access to clean water for hygiene and sanitation purposes, communities become more vulnerable to communicable diseases from unclean water. Women and girls of color, low-income women, and women living in poverty are affected by water insecurity and diseases. Sanitation for women, safe water access, and improved hygiene saves their lives and their infants' lives, drastically reducing maternal and infant deaths. Lastly, the third reason why the water crisis is a woman's problem is survival. Water scarcity is a quiet cause of perpetuating a cycle of poverty and inequality. It is also one of the leading factors inhibiting the fulfillment of much of the world's population. The poor and marginalized bear the suffering of resource scarcity, and the most vulnerable are the world's women and children. Since women in much of the developing world are still bound to traditional roles, their progress is hindered. Hence, unlocking the potential of women is the key to poverty reduction and long-term sustainable development. However, some would argue that the water crisis does not only affect women. They would claim that men also experience the same things as women are experiencing, like in terms of health, survival, and personal things. This claim may sound valid, especially to men, but we're talking about women in poor regions. They are always the ones responsible for finding water to drink. It is their task to find resources for their family. Yes, it affects the human race since the water is a basic human need, but collecting water is a task that falls mainly to women and girls as a part of housekeeping. The water crisis is a woman's crisis. They often bear the burden of carrying water for their families for an estimated 200 million hours each day. This disproportionately impacts women and girls, who will be left with no choice but to spend too much of their time and energy searching for and retrieving water. This is why access to clean water changes everything. It is a stepping stone to development. When women gain access to clean water, their families can better practice good hygiene and sanitation, enjoy good health, and attend school. They can put aside their worries about water-related diseases and lack of clean water access. Access to safe water and sanitation at home gives women hope, health, and opportunity.
Thank you for the knowledge, Miss Valdemoro. We have just realized that the water crisis is a personal problem to women in some regions of the world.
For the last speech, may I now present to you my co-host, Mr. Jed Peter C. Vergara, with his speech entitled Water-Related Ecosystems and Their Contribution.
Do water-related ecosystems need saving? Water is what makes life possible on Earth. However, many water-related ecosystems, like rivers and lakes, are degraded, contaminated with harmful chemicals, and polluted with trash. Water-related ecosystems are home to many diverse species, and these ecosystems provide them with their water needs. Also, these ecosystems support water security and various natural processes, like the nutrient cycle and the carbon cycle. Water-related ecosystems, such as wetlands, are degraded and exploited. These places may no longer exist in the future, and the species they once supported would come along with them. As for our water, the quality and the amount of water that we drink and use now may not be the same in the future. Thus, water-related ecosystems should be given protection, conservation, and proper restoration because these are home to many diverse organisms, support water security, and sustain natural processes essential for living organisms. Water-related ecosystems are home to various organisms. For example, lakes and rivers are water-related ecosystems where many fish thrive. In these places, certain fish species have populations that are dwindling. Overall, various kinds of fish may no longer be available in the future if their habitat is continuously polluted, degraded, and not given proper care. Thus, protection for water-related ecosystems is essential because of their capability to shelter organisms. Moreover, water-related ecosystems support water security. Water scarcity is an issue that the human race faces. However, water-related ecosystems can combat this scarcity. These ecosystems have aquifers that essentially hold groundwater. Hence, conservation of water-related ecosystem is important because it can sustain and provide clean water in the present and in the future. Finally, natural processes such as the nutrient and carbon cycles are sustained in water-related ecosystems. Natural processes are essential not only to humans, but for everything on Earth. These processes are as important as water because they help maintain life on this planet. All in all, processes would not be stable without water-related ecosystems. Thus, water-related ecosystems must be given protection to prevent the exploitation and degradation of these places. On the other hand, water-related ecosystems have high economic value that people can use for their livelihood. Furthermore, these ecosystems contain animals that people can capture and sell. Trees and certain minerals in these ecosystems have high economic value that can surely help sustain the people's daily needs and help society advance. Although water-related ecosystems contain resources of high economic value and can be a source of livelihood to many, these water-related ecosystems would soon disappear if the exploitation and degradation of these places continue. If people continue to cut trees, do overfishing, and do mining, the number of these water-related ecosystems would rapidly decline, leaving the people nothing to sustain their lives in the long run. Hence, actions are needed to protect, conserve, and restore water-related ecosystems. All in all, protection, conservation, and restoration of water-related ecosystems are essential for living organisms, keeping an adequate amount of water in the future, and processes that sustain life. People may not notice it, but water-related ecosystems' impact on life on Earth is significant. Without these ecosystems, life would be unstable. Thus, people must prioritize protecting, conserving, and restoring these ecosystems. It does not only help humans today, but also for the future.
Thank you very much, Jed, for the encouragement.
We've all heard the points raised by our speaker. All I can say is that in today's world, there are a lot of problems that we have to deal with, especially with our natural resources. Although they have been quite challenging to resolve, and there are already many people trying to solve these problems, it is important to know that we have to put our participation as people to ultimately kickstart the recovery of our natural resources in the long run.
Let these speeches inspire people of all ages, races, religions, and even interests to give back to our Mother Nature, even in the simple things that people do in their everyday lives. Lastly, with cooperation, it will be possible to solve these problems both short and long term.
And that does end our webinar for today. Thank you very much for attending and listening to the inspiring speeches. Remember, there is nothing too small to contribute when it will bring good in the long run.